Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Voices of Vitality, where we highlight the incredible professionals helping older adults and their families live well, age well, and feel supported every step of the way. Today's episode is especially meaningful because we're talking about something that touches so many families: dementia and caregiving. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, unsure of what to do next, or worried about a loved one's memory changes, this conversation is for you. I'm joined by Lisa Schilthuis, founder of Grand Minds, a dementia consulting and support service dedicated to helping families navigate the complex and emotional journey of cognitive decline. Lisa works closely with caregivers to provide education, guidance, and real-life strategies that make everyday life safer, calmer, and more manageable. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Jenna.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to start Grand Minds.
Sure. Yeah, I am an occupational therapist, and I had originally worked with adults with developmental disabilities and then an inpatient psychiatric unit. But I took several years off to raise my kids. And then during that time, my mom got dementia. And so she lived the last 20 years of her life with dementia. Then I started to go back into the field of OT and started working with older adults, and really, like, right away found that we didn't have a lot of tools to help these people, and it just kind of pushed me towards learning more. And so I went to lots of seminars to try to just like increase our effectiveness in working with this population.
I love that. Do you feel like there was a certain moment or an experience where you're like, whoa, families out there need way more support when it comes to dementia?
I think at first it was my mom, just seeing how we would turn to the medical field and did not get a lot of answers. But then in me returning to OT and kind of working with older adults and looking to what was being used out there by the other OTs, and PTs, kind of clinicians, I realized we were falling short. So I just really had a drive to try to change that. And just my next step was going to lots of conferences on dementia and seeing what I could do to bring some change to dementia care.
Great. So what does Grand Minds do, and who do you primarily help?
So we started because I think seeing these older adults with dementia, I noticed how very bored and lonely they were. And the statistics, like there's research studies that show if you ask them, what are their biggest complaints? It's boredom and loneliness. And just seeing that so often, just watching TV meaningfully and not being engaged because the things that they could once do, they can now not do because their world has just like gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. It's just so sad to see it. And then I was looking online, seeing like what products would engage them, what could we do to help their life be more meaningful. And although I can't have an impact on how much families come to visit, maybe as an OT, I could recommend some things that they could engage in and some products. And just not seeing much out there or things that were too hard, too visually overly stimulated, made me want to make some products that would meet their need. So when we went to make our products, we tried to do things that kind of could be adapted because we don't know exactly where they're functioning. So we wanted it to be so that when they did it, they felt successful, that they didn't do it and realize this is just one more thing that I'm going to fail at. And a lot of times when they would experience that failure, they would never want to do that type of thing again. So, for example, if you gave them a 500-piece puzzle thinking they can do it, and they went to do it and realized I can't do it, then they felt like a failure. And what you would hear them say is, I don't like puzzles, and they would never try one again. So the world is like shrinking. So I wanted products that could really help them feel successful. And I wanted to educate the caregivers in how to implement an activity and have them be successful with it. So we actually put notes to caregivers in with our products that can give them some tips on, it's mostly like how to make this a little bit easier, but also how to make it more a little more difficult. So we're hitting them at their ability level, because it doesn't feel good to be given something that's too easy, too babyish. And it also doesn't feel good to be given something that's too hard, because it's stressful for the brain and then it's not really all that beneficial. So trying to meet them at their ability level was really kind of our focus. So we started with some workbooks and sold those on Amazon, and some simple puzzles and some games. And then just kind of expanded our line a little bit. So we're up to like 14 products. We sell on Shopify, which is our website, and then on Etsy, and then also on Amazon is where we're currently selling. So that was like my initial focus. And then, in working with these people more, there's like so many solutions from a technology standpoint. So I thought, gosh, there's probably something that we could do with technology and help them. So then I came up, or, we came up with an idea of like having a device that would engage them meaningfully. If they were like looking at this device, it would have a lot of content that would fit their ability level, rather than watching a TV show with a lot of violence, which has then got some negative reaction to it. So we went down that road for a while. We actually were a part of some NIH grants and programs where we learned more like how we could get this product developed. And in doing that, they led us to do some research in the field to validate our idea. And so what that involved is interviewing people that are in dementia care, whether that be private duty aides, whether it's family caregivers, nurses, OTs, PTs, clinicians, nurse practitioners, whoever had their hands in dementia care, I went to interview. So I was, kind of planning on doing like 30 interviews or so. Got to interview 6, thinking my idea was absolutely great, and then was very disappointed. So nobody was seeing what I saw. And I really kind of had to step back, reevaluate, and change gears. So I'm actually still doing this research. So I have involved a professor at Grand Valley in communications that I'm doing it with. And I think we're up to like 70 or 80 interviews. And really what is really coming out in that research and talking to them, asking them like what's going on in dementia care that is not working well, and have found that the biggest unmet need is actually dementia education. So that kind of led us to switch gears a little bit. So we've come up with a different idea that's more tech-based. So one of the things we're currently working on is called Care Compass, and that will be an app that will help answer questions in real time. So that caregivers, professionals can get onto it and find some solutions for the actual day-to-day problems that their loved one is experiencing. And that's kind of at an individualized level. So like it'll have their profile and know about them, and then can come up with some strategies that may work. Because a lot of, coming up with how to help somebody with dementia is trial and error, and then knowing their preferences, knowing their history, knowing their routines. And that would include that. So it would be a way to get real-time answers, but also focusing on education. The other 2 things that we have done to focus on education is we've done like short educational reels on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And those, I had about like a 3-year period of time where we were working on those, or we're going to go back to it. But that was very helpful, because a lot of the paid caregivers are often young and maybe haven't had the life experience to know, exactly how to help somebody with dementia, but also just with technology, people's attention span has gotten shorter and shorter. So I wanted to be able to educate actually some of these people that were working with my mom who were younger, and try to do it as quickly as possible. So I would come up with these 20-second reels to educate on dementia. So those are still out there, and they were really kind of fun to do with my mom. And one of them, which is on communication tips for people with dementia, actually got like 5.5 million views. So that was really fun to see that explode. And then the final thing that we've done is I've become a certified dementia care trainer. So I'm training, it's called ADD-CT, so Alzheimer's disease and dementia care trainer. So I'm training other professionals, and it can be just personal caregivers, family members, in an 8-hour seminar that if they're a professional, they can then go on to get their CDP credentials, certified dementia practitioner credentials. And that's an 8-hour seminar. And I do one of those about every other week. And then, so that has been a change that I've made, because now I'm realizing that the real thing that needs to change is more people need to be educated on how to help somebody with dementia. And through that training program, that's just been very positive in helping people who actually are working direct care with people with dementia. So so we're doing products on the one side, and then we're doing this whole educational focus on the other side, and then have this Care Compass app kind of going in the background. So yeah, our main point is just to help people with dementia improve the quality of life and their caregivers. So
yeah, I absolutely love that, because I find that in our practice, we do work with a lot of individuals and their family members, that are the individuals that have dementia, and then their family members that are caring for them. And there's so much frustration. There's this sense of loss of, you guys come here and you're engaging them for an hour, and I never see them light up like this. I never see them respond like this, and I never see them move like this. What is your secret? And it's like, well, there's not actually necessarily a secret. It's that we're just simply engaging with them, and then trying to teach these caregivers exactly how to engage with them. That's why I love your product line, is because all too often, these caregivers are saying, well, they used to love to play euchre, but they can't figure out how to play euchre anymore. Or they used to love to do 1,000-piece puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
They can't do the 1,000-piece puzzles anymore. So I love the idea of having the product line as an immediate solution, and then the education as more of the long term, the long game.
Yeah, because you really do want to tap into those things they used to do, their old hobbies, their old interests, their old career even, and see if you can, because those are going to be the things that sit the strongest in their brain with them. So they, they're going to have an idea maybe how to knit, or have an idea how to play cards, because those are things that they've always done. So if there's a way that we can bring that forward and maybe adapt it in a way that they can still be successful, then you see how much their life lights up because of that. So kind of drawing on those long-term roles and patterns and adapting them for today to their current abilities is ideal, because that is what gave their life meaning in the past. And so it's likely to really be a strong point now if we can use our creativity to adapt it to them.
Absolutely. And I also feel as though all too often caregivers think, okay, well, the lights are on, but nobody's home, which I think is such a huge misconception, because the lights are on and somebody's home.
You just have to tap into it.
You just have to figure it out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So let's educate our listeners, and let's start with the basics. So we hear the word dementia a lot. Can you explain what that really means?
Sure. So when you think of that word dementia, you're kind of referring to like memory loss, confusion, and forgetfulness. I think that's what comes to mind. If you do take any dementia class, there is kind of a standard educational component, which is that dementia is an umbrella term, and that the different diseases of dementia fall under that. So that might be Alzheimer's disease, Lewy body dementia, or Parkinson's dementia, but there's about 100 different diseases that can fall under the term dementia. But another way to think about it is that if dementia refers to forgetfulness, loss of thinking skills, and confusion, you might relate that to just like how bananas, grapes, and pears are all a type of fruit. Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's dementia are all a type of dementia. So dementia is a general category with all the diseases falling underneath it.
Yeah. What are some of the most common types that you see, either in your business where people are reaching out for education, or in your clinical practice as an occupational therapist?
Well, I think, statistically, it's Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia and Lewy body that are the three most common. But when I go to work with somebody, a lot of times they do not have that diagnosis. And then Kind of keeping in mind that roughly 40 to 50% of people with dementia have mixed dementia. So then you've got like Alzheimer's disease and vascular disease. So we don't always know what they're really even diagnosed with. And my mom, for example, we didn't even like change doctors. And yet one time we had an Alzheimer's diagnosis, another it was Parkinson's dementia, another time it was Lewy body dementia. And it just kind of showed me that, people don't even always know which type they have, So with that, like, to me, the actual diagnosis doesn't matter as much as what they're presenting. So what are the symptoms that they are showing that we need to address? And what is the caregiver and the person with dementia saying to me that is a real problem, and just kind of going more from a symptom standpoint than worrying too much about which of the diagnosis it is, because at the end of the day, it doesn't, their quality of life isn't affected by which of the ones they have. We just want to try to improve that quality of life based on whatever it is that's showing up that we might be able to find solutions to.
Right. So what are the common misconceptions that you see from families when their loved ones begin to have some of these memory changes?
I think they think that there's sometimes nothing that can be done, that it's dementia. There's no cure for dementia. So, but what they don't realize is there are several things that we can do to improve the quality of life. And that is kind of really what matters. There's also things that we can get in and do that can either help the person maintain or slow the decline. And knowing those strategies really could make a big difference. I think they also think sometimes the person is being stubborn, that they're being lazy, that they're doing things on purpose, when the reality is that these are physical cognitive changes that are happening in their brain. And their brain can't physically do those things, rather than them actually being, lazy or stubborn. I think another thing that we see is that a lot of times caregivers are trying to correct them or reason with them, thinking that, hey, if we explained a little bit more to you, you would see our side. And the reality is that tends to increase their anxiety. It tends to cause more shame and more conflict and more tension in that relationship. So I try to teach validation through communication as much as I can. So, if a woman, say, living in a facility is like, where's my son? Where's my son? Where did he go? And is asking that every 5 minutes, we might want to say, you really love your son. Tell me more about him. And then focus on the feeling that they're having. And then from there, let them talk a little bit with some active listening, reflective listening, and then try to redirect them, a snack, a different activity, a different topic. So I think a lot of people are trying to correct and reason with people, and just realizing early on that doesn't really necessarily work. But it does kind of make me think of something else that I'm often seeing, is that I feel like when we realize our loved one has some memory loss and they do have dementia, we start to lose them while they're still alive. So we're kind of going through a grieving process, unfortunately, while we're still alive. And I think we want to hold on to them and be like, come back, come back, come back. And we want to correct them and try to make them right and make them back into the person that it is. And I think if the caregiver can move more into grieving them while they're still alive, can help to accept them, be accepted where they are. And then with that, there's less stress in the relationship, and we can maybe enjoy them a little bit more, rather than trying to, move them back to an early time, which we really can't do. So allowing yourself as the caregiver to go through the grieving process. In one of my videos, I did this little clip, and it's just a 20-second video, but it showed me with my kids when I was young. And I said, I knew to treasure the times when my kids were little, and then it switched to me and my mom. And I said, what I didn't know is to treasure the times when my mom's dementia was mild, because, her dementia is mild. I could still take her out to eat. I could still have a conversation. But when she went into late stage dementia, well, that was so very different, and I looked back and wished I would have, done more with her then, and I don't think that we realize that they are special and to be loved as the person that they are, maybe no matter where they are in the stage, and kind of working through that grief while they're still alive, which then even continues after they pass.
That is such an incredible perspective, and one that I'm going to start using today with people. I mean, it just really does put the whole thing in perspective when as parents, how many times are you told to cherish these moments because you're going to miss them?
Right?
And when you're in the heat of it, you're like, no, I'm not. I am
Yeah.
not going to miss this 8-year-old. No,
right.
I'm not.
We change our entire life for those kids, right?
Exactly. And it's so true that if you can just live in the moment and appreciate where they're at and what they're capable of doing in that moment and play off of it, the journey can be so much more joyful.
Yeah. I have so many very joyful moments with my mom, and she was in late stage dementia, So yeah, just accepting them where they are and realizing also that joy can be experienced at any stage, and just kind of knowing some of the tools to get there of, doing things at their ability level and adapting things to fit where they're at.
Oh, that. So can you give us a little insight into how dementia is different from, say, the normal cognitive changes that we experience as we get older?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's pretty normal for people to forget things as they age, and that's fine. They might forget people's names more often. They're going to forget an appointment here and there. They might lose their keys, but they're probably also going to be able to backtrack through and figure out, okay, where was I when I lost those keys? Oh yeah, I was, in the car. And so maybe they're still in the car. But with dementia, they would have a hard time backtracking through. With dementia, once it is affecting everyday life, it's interfering with everyday function. That's a sign that it probably is moving on to a disease process.
Good. So now when families can start to notice some of these changes, it can feel really scary I definitely think for the person with dementia, especially because I believe that in the early stages, they can tell what's
For
going on.
sure. It's the worst. That's the worst because they are aware of their deficit and it's painful and it's causing anxiety. They're so scared about the future. They also might be starting to cover it up because, oh my gosh, is my world going to change now that I do have memory loss? And then another thing they get into is denial, because denial is a psychological coping mechanism because it's so hard to deal with the truth. So really, for some people, that mild stage is actually the hardest. Once they get into moderate dementia, they might not be aware of their deficit. So there might be depression and apathy, but having that relief from not being aware of the deficit can be kind of a game changer, and they can be more content that way. Although at that point, family members are really seeing the issues that they're having more often. So that stage could be harder for the family members.
Yeah. So as far as early stages go and warning signs that you're noticing, we just talked about the normal changes with aging, and then how the dementia sort of impacts your life a little bit more. Are there certain things that you can say, like, oh, be on the lookout for this in the early stages, because this may mean,
Yeah. So yeah, and it depends on the person. Everybody's going to show something different. Like for my mom, what I remember is she would lose her car in the Meyer parking lot. She was still driving and would lose her car. Another time, I would go to visit her, and she lived out of state, and then they moved in state to be closer to me. But she would say that she would see she could see the plant growing. Which was concerning. What are you talking about? And then, one day I was home and, not near her. She called me and she said the house was full of children that needed to get picked up from school, and she didn't know really why they were all in her house. So, so for everybody, it's kind of different, but in general, it's going to be like repeating questions over and over, because Alzheimer's is a lot with the memory loss, forgetting the appointments, forgetting a recent conversation you just had with a loved one, or the day-to-day tasks are starting to get more difficult. So if a woman is always cleaning her house and all of a sudden that becomes too hard, like where she's missing parts of the cleaning, or she's cleaning so much over and over and over, kind of out of fear that I missed something, then going that way can be a sign too. But then following something more complex might be harder. So like, let's say they're used to paying their bills by check, switching over to online banking, that is an indicator. Managing their finances might become more difficult. Following a recipe might become more difficult, or just following a conversation, because it gets harder to understand the verbal words with dementia as dementia progresses. So following conversation starts to get harder, and we might see that person withdraw from complex conversations, or even withdraw from activities that they know are too hard. Maybe they always liked puzzles and they start to withdraw and they don't want to do that because, now it's too hard for them to do that 1,000-piece puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a perfect world, we want everybody to catch things early on, right? Catch it, get evaluated, and go through the whole diagnosis journey. Let's say an individual does catch their cognitive impairment early on, or catch their dementia early on. Can you kind of describe to us a little bit about what that diagnosis journey may typically look like for an individual?
Sure. And it's not the same for everyone, and there's not actually always a clear path. So I think a rule of thumb is to let the primary care provider know. So, if a spouse was concerned about their loved one having some cognitive decline, making that phone call to the provider before a normal appointment and letting them know, hey, I'm seeing some cognitive changes. Is there any chance you could do some kind of screening while you're there? And that's pretty typical for a primary care provider to do that. And then if they see some changes happening, then they might refer on for like a neuropsych eval, which would be like the gold standard for that. The problem is that the wait time to get in can be like 3 to 6 months. So then, they're waiting for that. If I see them because I do work home health as well. So if I'm seeing them in the community and am noticing cognitive declines without a diagnosis, I'll do dementia staging. And we as therapists can do that dementia staging, but what we can't do is diagnose them. So I'll do like 3 to 5 types of tests that could typically be done within an hour, giving them quite a variety of types of things to do, maybe some hands-on things like pretending to do a money transaction, or setting up, some pills and following the directions on a pill bottle, and then taking those results and summarizing where they're functioning. And then I share that with the primary care provider and the family so that the next steps will happen towards a diagnosis. Sometimes the primary care provider is comfortable going ahead and diagnosing, and other times they always have a method of referring on to a neuropsych eval.
Yeah. Great. So once that diagnosis happens, or maybe not a diagnosis, but once the family member and the individual living with dementia have sort of accepted that this is what's going to happen, this is when like the real journey happens, right?
Yes.
When the day-to-day stuff goes down.
Right.
What do you find is the biggest mistake that caregivers make early on?
I guess I would like to tell you that there's a biggest disappointment that there's not more help out there. So if you think about like maybe heart health initiatives in the United States, they started in 1948. There's so much information in America about heart health initiatives. For people with cancer, they're often given like a care partner to go upon that journey with them. But when it comes to brain health, the first initiative started in 2005 with money put forth to it in 2011. And since 2011 is when we're really starting to make the changes. But a lot of times, like professionals like you and I, when the new information comes into the field, a lot of times it's a 20-year lag between research and new innovative methods and actually putting those into practice. So we're behind in dementia care when it comes to other health problems. So I think sometimes they get this diagnosis and they're like, wow, I thought there'd be support here or somewhere to turn. And many of them are not finding a place to turn, which can be very hard. But I know that didn't answer your question. Do you
No, that's okay. That's still, I think, so important for people to understand, because I do think that after a diagnosis, there are several individuals that want to consume as much information as they can. And the real trouble is, especially in today's digital age, there is so much information. It's kind of nice to have this Sherpa of like, guide me through what I am supposed to do, because I think there are a lot of people out there that think I am willing to do whatever it takes to allow my loved one to live their best life in whatever time they have left. They just don't know where to start. And so they try and do it on their own. And that comes with its own host of frustrations and roadblocks and whatnot.
Yeah.
But my question was, what do you find is like the biggest mistake that caregivers make? I would say, to kind of like segue that question, sort of when going through the day-to-day, we talked a little bit about communication, right? But in the day-to-day, when living with an individual with dementia, where do you find that caregivers are like hitting the roadblocks or, becoming more frustrated with things?
Yeah. So I think one thing is that you feel in the beginning stages that you could probably handle this alone, because in the beginning, it's just starting. It's where, the early stages are going to be easier to deal with than the later stages. So I think feeling that you can handle this journey, that it's just dementia, like how hard can it be? So I think they don't see how hard that it's going to be. But I think one mistake that is coming up is that they're trying to change the person. So doing like if you go into this without education, your tendency is going to be to argue with them and to try to get them to realize the truth. You're going to be correcting them. And what we need to realize is that we cannot change the individual with dementia, but what we can change is our approach to them, and we can change the environment. So trying to shift from correcting them and getting them to do it the right way to more changing what we do and the environment around them to help them to be more successful. I would like to see people reach out initially to maybe get their own support system. If they, can join a caregiver support group, you can find ways to connect through the Alzheimer's Association online. There's online support groups and, ones that meet physically. But trying to connect with other people in the journey. And then another method that they could get in place is like home health care, getting professionals involved and trying to just increase the connections they have around them for people that might be able to provide support or education or guidance for the journey that they're going to have. Right away, I do encourage family members or like the spouse to get other family members involved, because there's things that we can do to slow the decline or at least maintain them. And like one of them being cardio exercise. Well, the caregiver, the spouse, most likely, or sometimes the daughter, who is providing the meals, giving them the meds, helping them through their self-care tasks, they're often, too overwhelmed to do that as well. So getting other people involved early to do simple things like help them through an exercise program, to get them going for a walk, or get them engaged in things that they can still do, because it really is just too much for one person to do. So increasing their support system as much as possible from the start, And yeah, I would also like to see them get educated on the early side so that they can maybe identify some things that would help them to be more successful.
Yeah, I agree. And along with that, getting the education on the early side and then finding a partner that doesn't leave them high and dry, that is like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, we are here for the long haul. We want to do check-ins, whether that be, everybody, obviously, as you said several times, everybody is so different, but I feel as though it should be similar to the dental model, right? Let's do a cognitive check-in every 6 months
For
and
sure.
where we're at, because people are going to change, things are going to change, your cognition is going to change, your mobility is going to change, your caregivers may change. Let us be a partner in those changes with you, and I think that leads to a significantly smoother journey.
Yeah. And one thing that I find that is really successful, like for me, my journey with my mom became so very lonely. I became her guardian in the last years, in her 8 last years. And although she lived in a facility, she's not from the area, so she did not have friends visiting. And I felt like everything was on me, and it was so hard because I actually had to go through the court system to get guardianship of her because of neglect issues. So there's just so much difficulty. And what I did is hire a private duty aide and have them come in to visit her like twice a week to do some of these things, like socially interacting with her, giving my mom a friend besides myself, and reading with her, getting her to engage. And that helped me a ton because it felt like, oh good, I'm not the only one, I'm not doing this journey on my own. And although that person wasn't a professional, they had a heart for older people, and it worked beautifully, and it helped my mom so much, and it also helped me so much. So that was hiring somebody who kind of does it on the side as private duty, because they don't like, I guess if you go through an agency, that works out really good too. And I advocate for that, but you're going to have more relationship and consistency if you can find somebody that just happens to do it on the side.
I love that too. I too truly believe that caregivers should not be doing it alone, because caregiver burnout is far less than any resources you pull in. Do you suggest that families start to look for help like this early on? So maybe in the early stages of the dementia, that individual can make a personal connection with the help that they bring in?
What I try to do with the families is ask every family member to come meet with me as a group, to let them know like what the person needs, and letting them know that this is too much for one person. This is too much for that daughter, or this is too much for that spouse. So could other people help? And what works in your schedule that you're willing to do? Could you take them out, to the senior center once a week for an exercise group? Can you come over with them and play a simple game with them? Can you come over with them and visit with them? Can you give them some rest, give the caregiver some respite, because you'll take every Tuesday night? So first reach out to what is naturally in the person's life. I have seen even, church members come over and spend afternoons with a person, and then me educating them on what will help. And that's work. So kind of reaching out to kind of keep the costs down to who's ever naturally in the person's life. And then from there, moving out towards if you need to pay somebody. But yeah, you do want to think about the next steps, because it really shouldn't go from in-home help, a spouse doing it all by themselves, to now it's too much for me. They need to go to a memory care unit. There are gradual steps along the way, and they involve the caregiver getting some respite help, and for things like even for like showering or an exercise routine that will keep them stronger. So bringing that in-home help in for, a couple days a week is a way to help the person age in place, which they tend to do better aging in place. But a lot of times there is a point where they can't continue to do that.
And now, just a shameless plug for our professions as therapists, we've mentioned several times exercise.
Mhm.
And I know that in my practice, I hear a lot from caregivers, therapy is worthless. They can't learn anything new. They're not going to participate. This is what it is. Eventually, they're going to just be in the wheelchair or in the recliner. We don't need to go the route of trying to strengthen. What would you say to those particular caregivers?
Yeah. Well, I would say that is the old school of thought. So I think somewhere, I can't remember exactly what year, but around the year 2000, the laws for therapy changed. And we used to not see those people for therapy, saying that there wasn't anything we could do. So somewhere around 2000, the law changed, and we are now to adapt our ways to that person with dementia. So are all of our therapists and clinicians being trained in dementia to be able to adapt things for the person with dementia. So when we think about exercise, so you and I have heard it, 30 minutes of cardio exercise is good for all these different things. Well, we both know we cannot get that from an 84-year-old with cognitive decline, but we're going to look at what we can do, small steps that would make a difference. So for instance, I know you and I go in and do our functional tests. We have them marching for like a 2-minute step test, or we have them stand up and sit down. And those are cardio exercises as well. So if I find that, when I'm having them march, they can comfortably do 40, I want to try to get that into their daily routine and ask for a few things. Can they go for a walk comfortably, doing laps in the house, or, even down the block, depending on their safety and ability level, and trying to just get small things in place. And they do make a big difference. And then really getting those things into the person's daily routine as much as possible. I think we as therapists sometimes are asking for way too much and have these really high goals. Whereas if we can bring them down into the person's ability level more and lower our expectations, so that when they meet our expectation, we can be like, good job. I have a lady right now that she can only stand up and sit down 3 times in a row. But hey, good job. We really want to say, hey, do it 10 times. But we want to build on their success and make them feel confident. But yeah, I think we as therapists have ways that we can adapt things so that they are successful. And what it is, it's going to be small changes over time rather than these big changes that we might be able to see in a shorter period of time with somebody that doesn't have cognitive decline.
Right. I love that. And just to add to that, that again, being with someone along the journey, as you said, exercise doesn't look like bicep curls or sprints or squats in an aging adult with cognitive decline. But what the exercise can look like is functional exercise that helps them, like
Sure.
you said, age in place, because the decline is going to go significantly slower if that
Mhm.
person is in their own home than it would if they were, if they went to an assisted living or a memory care unit.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that in our practice, we have several clients on our caseload that we see for what we call maintenance therapy.
Mhm.
So times a week, our therapists go into these individuals' homes and are exercising with them
Mhm.
with the goal of not needing a higher level of care.
Right, for sure.
And that works. That works. Their insurance pays for it. And,
Yep.
as we mentioned earlier, everybody loves to exercise with a therapist. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not love, that might be a really strong word,
Yeah.
but they're willing to exercise with a therapist.
But when you and I come back next week and they can tell us that they did it, it's like, oh, good job. I mean, I feel like they really are, listening to us, and they like that praise that we get. And we have to really adapt what they're doing to their ability level as well. And another thing we can do is try to use the functional tasks, even if they're not doing it like perfectly. So for instance, can they still take the dishes out of the dishwasher, and maybe even just set them on the counter if they can no longer find the home to where they go in the cupboards? Let them do the parts that they can, And that is helping two things. They've got to problem solve to get the dishes out and put them on the counter, but they're also getting physical movement and doing that too. So we want to kind of capitalize on things that they can still do functionally rather than moving over towards doing everything for them. And
Right.
sometimes that involves like teaching the caregiver that the outcome of what they're doing doesn't really matter. What matters is they're engaging and that they have a purpose. So, like for my mom, what I would have her do, like I would have her come to my house quite a bit because she was living in a facility. And, I think at one point she felt like she was a little bit burdensome because, I'm working and got a family. And I was like, oh gosh, Mom, no, I need you to come over to help me with the laundry. Will you please help me with the laundry? So I'd bring her over and give her a pile of clothes. And, even though she just kind of went swish, swish, swish with the clothes and moved them, it was like, gosh, thank you so much. That was so helpful. So it was about her, having purpose, and then she's moving because she's folding these clothes. So, and we're kind of tapping into her long-term roles of being a homemaker. And those are the type of things that we can get exercise in addition to like meaning and purpose and the thinking skills that go with tasks, simple everyday tasks like folding laundry.
I love that. So, Lisa, what gives you hope in this work?
I had such a hard time with the caregiving journey, and I struggled so much. It was so difficult for me because of all I went through, and I would like to relieve the stress for other people going through that. So to try to improve the quality of life for people that have dementia and their caregivers, and I think that starts with education. So the more that I can, share and educate, that is really what gives me hope.
I love that. And what would you like every caregiver that's listening to remember?
I really want them to know the importance of two things. One is the importance of engaging, participating, and interacting with somebody with dementia because it helps give them quality of life and helps reduce that depression, and trying to do that at their ability level, but then also moving the communication style away from correcting to validating their feelings, because we can't change who they are, but we can change how we interact in the environment.
That's great. So, how can people connect with you to learn more?
My website, so it's grandmindsllc.com, and we have educational seminars are all on there, and then our products are on there, and then you can connect with me through email. I'm happy to help people in any way I can, if that means a phone call or communicating by email.
Great. Well, Lisa, this has been such a meaningful and important conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your heart with our community. And to everyone listening, if you're caring for a loved one with memory changes, please know that you're not alone and support does exist. And if you'd like to learn more about Lisa and Grand Minds, we'll put all of the information that she just shared with her on how to contact her in the show notes. And if this episode made you think of somebody who could benefit from hearing it, please share it with them. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Voices of Vitality, where we celebrate the people helping others live their best life at every stage of life.
Thank you.